Have you ever really thought about how an idea can just leap across an ocean and set the world on fire? Well, we're about to dive into a 50-year period where that's exactly what happened. It was a wave of revolutions that created this single, explosive chain reaction. So let's go find that first spark.
It's a huge question, right? But it is the key to understanding our whole story today. I mean, how does a protest in one country actually inspire another one thousands of miles away?
To get our heads around this, let's think about something a little more recent, the Arab Spring. It all kicked off with protests in Tunisia, and then, boom, it felt like the entire region just erupted. You had different countries, different leaders, sure, but they were all connected by the shared hunger for freedom. And that feeling, it was absolutely contagious. That is a revolutionary wave.
Okay, so now let's rewind the clock about 200 years. Between 1775 and 1825, the Atlantic world experienced a similar, and you could argue an even bigger, wave of change. And this brings us right to the heart of it all, the big question, the puzzle that historians are still debating. Were the American, French, Haitian, and Latin American revolutions all part of one single story? Or was it just a crazy coincidence, a bunch of separate sparks that happened to catch fire all at the same time?
To answer that, we've got to set the stage. What did the world even look like back then? Well, it turns out a lot of places shared the exact same ingredients, the perfect recipe for a revolutionary explosion.
So here's the common ground. First up, massive war debt. Britain and France were basically broke after the 7 Years' War. Second, to pay for it all, they started hitting their people with new taxes, often without giving them any say in the matter. And third, you've got these radical new Enlightenment ideas about liberty and people's rights spreading like wildfire, carried across the ocean in books, pamphlets, and in the minds of sailors and travelers. The whole situation was just a powder keg waiting for a spark.
And that spark was lit in America. So let's do a quick run-through of how those dominoes began to topple across the Atlantic.
It all kicks off in America. This was the first domino to go, a colonial rebellion that would send ripples across the entire globe. This was a direct pushback against those British taxes we just talked about. The colonists, all fired up on Enlightenment ideals, were asking a pretty simple question: why should we pay a king who's an entire ocean away? Their victory wasn't just about breaking away, though. It was about creating something completely new, a republic where the people ruled themselves. In a world full of kings, that idea was pure dynamite. And an idea that explosive, well, it doesn't stay put. It crossed the Atlantic and landed right in France, which was, let's just say, very fertile ground.
You see, the French had been watching the Americans really closely. They'd even helped fund their war, which ironically just pushed their own kingdom deeper into debt. But here's the difference. Where the Americans wanted a divorce from Britain, the French wanted to burn their own house down. This wasn't just about changing the government. It was about destroying 1,000 years of monarchy, aristocracy, and tradition, all to remake society from the ground up.
And if you think the French Revolution was radical, the next domino to fall was completely off the charts. We're heading south, to the very wealthy French sugar colony of Saint-Domingue, which we now know as Haiti.
This was, without a doubt, the most radical turn of the entire era. In Haiti, enslaved people heard all this talk coming from France about liberty and the rights of man, and they basically called the world's bluff. They rose up, they defeated Napoleon's best soldiers, and they didn't just end their own slavery, they founded the first independent black republic in history. This sent a shockwave of hope to enslaved people everywhere and absolute terror to slave owners across the globe.
The final wave of this revolutionary tsunami came crashing down on the shores of Latin America.
All the chaos back in Europe caused by the French Revolution and then Napoleon's wars had fatally weakened the Spanish and Portuguese empires. Seeing their chance, colonies all across Central and South America rose up and declared their independence, shattering that old colonial system forever.
So we see this sequence of events, but were they just a coincidence, just a matter of timing, or was there a direct chain of cause and effect? Let's connect the dots.
First, just look at this timeline. These events aren't spread out over centuries. They're all packed together, overlapping and bumping right into one another in one very chaotic 50-year period.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how this lays out the chain reaction. It's not just a timeline, it's a story. The war leads to debt. The debt leads to taxes. The taxes spark the American Revolution.
The success of America inspires the French Revolution. The ideas of the French Revolution ignite the Haitian Revolution, and the chaos from all that weakens Spain, which directly leads to the Latin American revolutions. You see, each step is a direct consequence of the one before it.
So, let's go back to our big question. With all this evidence, all these connections, can we say it was all one single movement?
Well, historians are still debating it. The one-wave argument says, look, they all shared the same ideals, they all rejected absolute rulers, and they were all linked by war and information. But the many stories camp points out that they were also very, very different. The American Revolution was mainly political, while the Haitian Revolution was a complete social and economic transformation. And we have to remember, the liberty and equality they fought for often didn't apply to everyone. For women, for the enslaved, and for indigenous people, the revolution was far from over.
So maybe the point isn't to pick a side. Whether it was one movement or many, the real takeaway is that revolutions are not isolated. They travel. Ideas, inspiration, and opportunities for change are carried across borders by books, by people, and by the chaos of war.
And that leaves us with a final thought. Back then, a revolutionary idea traveled at the speed of a ship. Today, it travels at the speed of light. So, if a pamphlet could help set the world on fire back then, what can a single post do now?